everyone, I wanted to show you a little sculpture I did recently. It's a very small one because it's going to go in Winnie's cottage when it's finished. And what I made was a mini head in a jar. I've done some larger heads in jars before, but I wanted to do a mini one. And I wanted to do like an old hag type head. So first of all, started off with some epoxy sculpt. I want to use up the last little bit of the epoxy sculpt that I've got. And first of all, what you have to do is you have to mix it together 50-50. You have to mix the epoxy clay with the hardener part, otherwise it'll never set. I find if you just squish it around for about a minute, you tend to get, you know, it tends to be mixed quite enough and it tends to set really well. So just keep kneading it and mixing it, making sure it's all mixed together. And then what I did was then start sculpting. And to sculpt, first of all, what I did is rolled a rough ball shape and then just squeezed in the sides and created a rough head shape. It doesn't have to be precise. I'm not going for, like, you know, perfectly realistic or anything. And then I poke a couple of eye sockets in. So basically I'm looking for a sort of skull shape at the minute. And then I create a hole for the mouth. And I just tease that shape out of the clay using my clay tool. And then it's just a case of refining the head and getting the shapes that I want. I start pressing in and creating little wrinkles and things and shaping the eye sockets. I wanted it to kind of look like the bones were sort of sticking out a little bit on the skull. And then to help me with the rest of the sculpt, so I wouldn't keep squishing it because at this stage the clay is quite soft, I placed it on a end of a clay tool. Then I made a rough nose shape, and basically you kind of want like a sausage of clay that's narrower at one end and the narrow end goes at the top. Then you push your clay tool in to create a couple of nostrils and you've got a very simple nose. Like I said, I'm not going for absolute realism or anything, I'm just going for something that will pass for a old haggard head in a jar. And I started creating little wrinkles and marks in the skin. These came out more like dots, so I did go in and fix this later on. But for now, it's not too, you know, I just left it as it was for now. Then created wrinkles in the forehead and above the eyes, or the eye sockets, and around the eye sockets. This is the part where I realised it was coming out like dots and it looked weird, so I just smoothed that down, just dipped my finger in water and then rubbed it to smooth that down. Then I placed little eyeballs in the sockets. And these are just very basic eyes. And then the next part is the fiddly part, which is creating little eyelids. So I just get a little bit of clay and squish it and then cut it in half. And it gives me rough eyelid shapes that I can use. I like adding eyelids to these because it creates the expression. Like it just looks like sort of like a dead staring skull at first, but then once you put the eyelids on, you've got like a sort of frowny look to the face, which is what I like. And then it's just a case of blending those in and making sure they're stuck down properly. Then I take another small circle of clay and chop off a smaller piece for the bottom lid. And then it's just a case of pressing around and making sure all the edges are smoothed down and make sure it stays in place. And then another one for the other eye. And I don't mind if it kind of looks haggard and battered and a bit twisted and weird, because obviously it's a head in the jar at the end of the day. Then I created a couple of tiny teeth, Literally just flatten up the clay and then cut out a very small triangle that you could use for a tooth, and then chop the top off. And then I just rounded it off a little bit because I didn't want it to be an absolute dead, perfect triangle. I wanted it to have one tooth at the top, one tooth at the bottom, a proper haggard old granny type face that I wanted to create for this. Like a little old, I imagine it's like an old witch or something, because obviously it's going in Winnie's, it's going in Tumbledown Cottage. And my idea is that this is another witch that she's killed for some reason, to get revenge or whatever. And she's got her head in a jar. She's casting some magic with it or something, I don't know. Or she's just keeping it as like a trophy of her defeated enemy. Then I used the scalpel to add some more finer details. This is a scalpel that's pretty blunt, but I use it just for like fine details. I've got my new one, which is what I use for actually cutting stuff. This works for clay, so I just keep this one for using with clay. Then just put a bit of water on and rubbed around just to blend some of those little lines and marks in. Then the next stage was to work out how I was going to do the hair, and I've got some black acrylic wool, so I decided what I was going to do is create little wefts with the wool. To do that, what you do is you take a bit of wool and you brush it with a dog brush. It's like the ones with all the very fine little teeth on for brushing dog's fur. And you brush it out and it creates these little wefts of very fine, soft hair. I was going to give her grey hair. I couldn't find any grey, like my white wool or grey wool anywhere, so I've decided to use the black wool. And worked on creating a couple of wefts, and then it was a case of figuring out how many wefts I needed and where I needed to place them on the head when it was set. As you can see, it just takes a little bit of brushing and then you get the nice soft wefts at the end. So here's me just deciding how long it wants to be and where it's going to go on the head. And I had the idea of like inserting it into the clay, but that didn't work. So I did create a dent in the top of her head, but it doesn't matter. That gets covered up later on with hot glue and the wefts anyway. But I was trying to see if I could just insert the hair so it would stay like attached to the head when it dried, but nah, didn't work, but it was worth a try. So I tested out that weft and thought, yeah, that's the right length, that's about what I want. So then it was a case of creating some more wefts. I think I created 3 in the end that I used. Again, she hasn't got to have perfect hair because she's going to be stuffed in a jar, but it was just so it just gives the impression of her having long, thin, wispy hair. And as you can see, I've placed her on top of my tub, epoxy sculpt tub, and that's how I left her to dry, so she wouldn't like touch the table, because you can end up where the sculpture gets stuck to the table, or it'll deform slightly because it's still soft. Like with the weight of the clay, it'll just get flat at the back, and I didn't want that. So what I did was just left her on the clay tool and placed her on top of the epoxy sculpt tub to set. And while she was setting, I created some more wefts. Again, it was only 3 or 4 because you don't need a lot of wefts for obviously a head this size. And I just made sure I brushed out the tops as well so it was fluffy from top to bottom. And then what I did was I left the head to dry overnight. It takes about 12 hours to fully cure, just because it's like a solid lump of it. If I made it where it was hollow inside, because it was based on like, if I used like foil or something for the inside, it would dry quicker. But I always leave epoxy sculpt overnight anyway, and that tends to do the trick. It works better if it's setting in a warm room as well, by the way. And once I got it to set, I then had a look at how I was going to attach the hair and just testing out placement in the jar, just so I could see how I wanted it to work, what it was going to look like. And I was quite pleased with how it looked at this stage and thought, yeah, this will work. but obviously it's a case of painting. And to paint the head, all I did was I applied a wash of black acrylic paint over the top, then wiped off the excess because I just wanted a very basic colour to it, and that's it. If I wanted to, I could put resin in the jar as well, but I was quite happy to just have it like this. I'm going to work on the top. I'm not sure how I want to do the lid yet. And this is like a little bead container thing, so it comes with that white screw-on lid. I might do it where it's like tatty cloth over the top and it's tied with rope or something, but I haven't got those at the minute. So that's it. That's how to make a mini head in the jar. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.